Hello, Purple Cult. Welcome to another episode of the Purple Sessions. I'm your hostess, Anastasia Elliot. I'm an independent rock artist with a great passion for mental health and wellness, and I created this show where I talk to fascinating people from all walks of life about creativity and mental health and wellness and how they inform each other. Today I'm interviewing West China Tea House founder Sohan Fan. West China Tea House is based in Austin, Texas, but they also have an incredible online community where you can purchase teas, and there's online community events and forums where you can chat all things tea, and there's even a Tea of the Month club where they send you multiple different teas to try, and you have a Zoom tea ceremony tasting every month. Through his passion for Chinese tea culture, he created this amazing company that sources unique farm direct teas and artisan tea wares, and his vision is to have a tea community that is worldwide. As an avid tea drinker, I loved getting to talk to him about his stories of going to the Chinese tea farms and also about the downsides of commercial tea products and just the magical world of teas and all the things that they help with. If you've never had an interest in tea or tea ceremonies before this, I think this conversation could change your mind. There's a coupon code that he has given to all of you lovely viewers. On his website, you just use the code PURPLECULT and you will get a nice percentage off of your tea order. If you haven't yet, please hit the subscribe button and like and comment. We would love to hear your thoughts on the episodes, and if there's anybody that you would love to see me interview, please let me know. Also, I just released my music video for my new song, London, so please check that out. I hope you enjoy today's episode. All right, so I wanted to start today with you kind of introducing who you are and what you do before I start throwing all these questions at you.
Cool. Awesome. My name's Sohan Fan. I'm the founder of West China Tea. We are importers of farm direct Chinese tea and artisan teaware, like this little teapot. And we have a tea house here in Austin, Texas. I'm in it right now. It's called West China Tea House. And
so beautiful.
Do a little pan real quick just so you can see, I don't know, like a tiny little corner of this place. And there's people in the front room right now, so I didn't want to do it there. The front room's a lot prettier, but it's busy right now. So I'm here. And we serve tea, we sell tea, we import tea, we teach people how to serve tea and about tea. We have a YouTube channel called Tea House Ghost. And we do events. We serve tea at parties. We produce our own parties, and we are looking at opening our first or our second location in Hendersonville, North Carolina this year.
Nice. Should come to Nashville next. You should definitely use a tea house in Nashville.
Oh yeah, no, I'm down. I'd love to do one in Nashville. Honestly, I think everywhere could use a tea house. I can't think of anywhere that couldn't use a tea house, and Atlanta is definitely like high on our list, and then Nashville would be like a stepping stone from there, because that's the trick is like.
Well, I'm glad we're on the radar.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we were down in Austin for South by Southwest, and the day before we were gonna leave, we were craving tea and like Googled the best tea house in Austin, and ended up walking into your shop like 15 minutes before it was going to close, and there was like the loveliest little community drinking tea, and like I met some really awesome people, and then David was there, and he was like, I'm buying you a couple of teas to try, and so I walked out with the most awesome bag of teas, and they've been absolutely delicious.
Yeah, it was really great to get to meet you guys, and then you were the second Nashville musicians to come in.
Yeah.
That week, of South by, right after, so yeah, I guess that means Nashville is a good place for a tea house because there's a lot of Nashville people like tea.
We need it. All right, my first question for you is that your website says you wish to build community worldwide through tea culture, from the farmers who grow it to the people who serve it and those who enjoy it, and that tea brings people together. I think a lot of people don't really think about how far tea travels, or how many people touch it, or how many hands it goes through before it gets to your cup. And I think the same can be said for our food. in like Buddhism and Ayurveda and other cultures, there's a lot of focus on like intentional eating and like thinking about all of the ways that, you know, all the things your food went through to get to you. And I love that intentional thinking. And I think that tea ceremonies definitely are rooted in intention and intentional drinking, intentional community. Now, I just wanted to ask you about kind of, it's not really a question, but like I'm sure you have a lot to say on that, on just the community and intention aspect of it.
Yeah, I mean, starting with the identity of the tea. You know, the teas that we have here, we know who made them. This was made by a guy named Xiangge, the tea I'm drinking right now. The tea that you've got, the purple grace, is made by a guy named Li Shulin. I know them personally. I've known them both for years. Li Shulin I've known for more than 10 years now. I know his grandkids. When I go to Yunnan, I stay at his house. You know, I don't stay at a hotel. And that's the kind of relationship we have. And who they are, it has everything to do with what the tea is. But you will never know what the tea that you get at a grocery store, who made that.
Mm-hmm.
And even if they have like a picture of like a grower on there, there's very little chance that the tea that's in that tea bag or even loose leaf tea was touched by that person, because the nature of the economies of scale is that the individuality and the identity of things that we consume has to be erased in order to make them homogenized and standardized. Mm-hmm. Someone picked the cabbage, you know, someone grew and picked the cabbage that you buy at the grocery store, but there's no chance you would ever know. And the economic system that brings that cabbage from the farm to your table does everything in its power to erase the individual history and identity of that head of cabbage. Because if each head of cabbage has its own identity and its own history, then they could be said to have different values, and that's not okay. They have to have the same value, because that's how you do business. You know, you have to be able to put one price on a bunch of products and treat them as all the same. Mm-hmm. And we have the same idea with our food, like you're saying, that we don't know where our food comes from.
Even like, like by the time you get it, it's like, you know, it just looks like raw little steaks and packages. Like you're not seeing right. the animal, and like you're not at the farm or seeing the process of, that was like a living, breathing thing. And a lot of them are obviously raised in terrible conditions, and there's not a lot of honor in food anymore.
Absolutely. That cow had an identity. That cow was a person too, not a human being person, but a cow person. Yeah. And they were a living being, and they had their own soul and their own life and their own memories. And I'm not a vegetarian, but I do recognize that those animals that we eat are beings that have their own identity, and they're not all the same as each other. They're not products, they're beings. And we have to turn them into products in order to make them saleable and fungible and easy to move. And to the point where, in China, when you eat a duck, for example, or a fish, they serve it to you with the head. It's there. And there's two reasons for that. One is that people like to eat the flesh off the head, like the cheeks and the eyes and things like that, and those are considered good. Another one is that it's considered disrespectful to separate the face of the animal from the body of the animal. Because if you just take the body and remove the face and the head, then it's this huge disrespect to the animal. And also, you can't tell how fresh a fish is unless you can look at its face. You can see its eyes and its gills, and you can see its face. You can see how fresh the animal was. And so there's this connection there. But if you put an American you bring an American to a Chinese restaurant, and I'm speaking from lots of experience here. You bring an American to a Chinese restaurant and you set a plate down in front of them, and there's a fish with a head on it. More often than not, they are really upset by that, and they're really grossed out by that. And they're like, oh my God, I don't want to eat that. It's got a face. I don't want to eat that chicken with a head. Mm-hmm. I don't want to see the animal's identity. I don't want some Americans won't eat meat that has bones in it, mm-hmm. Because the idea of seeing the bone brings home that reality that I'm eating a living animal that was alive. And it takes away from that anonymous patty.
Yeah. I spent a month in China, and we had this one dinner where we went to this amazing restaurant where it was very family style with these Chinese officials. And I was sitting next to the oldest one who was going to be placing like the order for the whole table, and it was going to be like, you know, a sharing style meal. And I was young. I was looking at all the pictures of the things and kind of pointing out the things that I was like, you eat this, like sea worms, and there was a deer lip and frog ovary soup, and like things that I was just like, wow. And I was putting all of this out to him, and he thought I wanted to eat all of that, and so he ordered like exclusively the things on the menu that I was a little iffy about. And you know, you have to try everything or it's very rude over there.
Right.
So I ate all kinds of things that evening that I never thought I would. There was one fish in particular that I ate that was delicious, that made your face numb, your face and your mouth numb. I don't remember what that fish was called, but it was so cool.
That would be shui zhu yu. That's a Sichuanese dish. Yeah, and that sounds like if there were sea worms and shui zhu yu on the same menu, that sounds like maybe Shanghai or like Beijing or somewhere like that.
I think that meal was in Beijing. Growing up, my dad worked in Asia a lot, and so he took us for a month, and we went to Beijing, and Hangzhou was my favorite place, and I just fell in love with Chinese culture. I took 4 years of Chinese, and I love it. But we went to the tea museum in Hangzhou and got to see the Dragon Well tea farm and go have oolong and see the fields, and oh my gosh, it was just magical.
That's awesome. Yeah, we actually, I think I've got a box here, and it just came in, and I'm pretty sure that it has Longjing Dragon Well tea in it. It's one of several boxes that's on its way, and that's probably what's very exciting.
I need to order some. It was so delicious. I loved that experience, and the fields are just so beautiful. I could have very easily lived there forever.
How are the frog ovaries?
That one wasn't. That one was not one of my favorites. Sea worms were definitely lowest on the list. I remember those being very slimy, and I just couldn't get down with those. But the sea worms and the frog ovary soup, or deer, yeah, frog ovary and deer lip soup. Those were the worst things I ate there. My favorite meal in Asia was at we went to this monastery and got to have a all vegetarian meal with these monks, and it was some of the most incredible food I've ever eaten in my life.
Yep. Yeah, some of my best food experiences in China were also those like Buddhist vegetarian meals, because a lot of times they're just growing the food.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of times they're growing the food, and it's just they're cutting it right out of the ground and cooking it. Yeah.
So how often do you go over there? How often do you visit the farms? Is it what's your favorite tea farm you've ever been to? Like, what's that process like? Do you always love to go and know the farmers you're getting the tea from?
Oh yeah, that's kind of our MO. Is we have a few teas that we get from, for example, tea masters who are processing the tea, and they don't grow it, but they buy it from the farmers. They have close working relationships with the farmers, and they do the processing, which is like hand processing, traditional processing, roasting it with charcoal specifically. So there's some teas that we get from the master, not the farmer. There are other teas that we get from collectors. So like vintage teas, aged teas, a lot of the fermented teas like Hei Cha from Hunan. Those are made by these factories, and then different vintages of those get collected and stored. And there are people whose whole business is buying, storing, aging, and then selling these teas. And so we have relationships with some of those people. They're not the people who grew the tea, but they're sourcing the tea, and we're buying from them. But the vast majority, 90+%, 95% of our teas, we buy from people who grew it, and I know them. Sometimes multiple members of the team know them. Moncho's been to China with me twice. Eric's been to China with me once. Those are two of our team members, but I definitely know them, and that's kind of our MO. And that's why we don't have, for example, Japanese tea or Indian tea. It's not that I don't like those. I do like those kinds of tea, but I don't speak Hindi or whatever they speak in Assam and Darjeeling, and I've never been to India, and I don't know any tea farmers in India, and so any tea that I could get that was Indian tea would not be farm direct tea. Likewise, I don't know any tea farmers in Japan, so any tea that I was getting from Japan would not be farm direct tea, so we don't sell it.
So what makes somebody a tea master?
Somebody is a tea master. It depends what terminology you're using. There's a couple of different words that get translated into English as tea master. So in the Japanese tea ceremony, chanoyu, the person who performs the tea ceremony is called in English a tea master. But that's different than what we use that term as. So for example, I'm not a tea master. The person who does what I'm doing right now is not a tea master. You can say that they're a tea server, or you can say cha bo shi, tea doctor is kind of how that translates from Chinese. Bo shi is like a doctorate or someone who's researched something, so it doesn't have to actually mean like a medical doctor. But that sounds ridiculous if you translate into Chinese. And then you can't just say the Chinese word, because people would say chaboshi, because that's how it looks. If people can't read pinyin, will say chaboshi instead of chaboshi, and it would be unrecognizable. So a tea master in China is someone who processes the tea. Someone who, and that can be the farmer. Sometimes the farmer and the master are the same person. The tea that you're drinking, the farmer and the master are the same person, Li Shulin. He grows it and he processes it. But in the case of like some of our oolongs, for example, we're buying it from Along or from Shu Zhengcong or Lin Yaobin. These are people who have dedicated their lives to the art of roasting tea, tanbei, the art of roasting tea with charcoal. And so they're the master, but like Lin Yaobin grows the tea and roasts it. Along just roasts it. So he's just a tea master. He's not a tea farmer.
Wow. So when you were talking about the vintage teas, does tea change flavor over time as the leaves sit? Does like a wine?
Yes. Some teas go bad, like green tea. You don't want to really drink a green tea after a year or 2 years. And then some teas get better with age, like white tea is an example of this. Aged white tea is highly sought after. The saying for white tea goes 1 year tea, 3 years medicine, 7 years treasure, describing the way that white tea appreciates over time. Pu'er famously appreciates with age. That is one of the most famous aged teas from Yunnan. It's a tea that ferments, either comes out fermented or it's fermented naturally over time. And it's from these big trees in Yunnan, these ancient trees. And that's the most well-known aged tea, and that definitely can be very valuable as it ages. And then hei cha, which means black tea. It's not what we think of as black tea. What we call black tea, like Lipton, chai, Earl Grey, the Chinese call red tea, hong cha. But they do have a category of tea called black tea, hei cha, which is fermented tea. And when any tea that's fermented, including pu'er, can be considered hei cha. Pu'er is like a specific name of a specific region. It's like saying champagne. So pu'er is champagne, hei cha is sparkling wine, right? And so hei chas also get better with age. They improve with age. Sotheby's Hong Kong just did an auction of antique pu'er, and a single cake of pu'er from 1905 sold for $45,000.
Oh my goodness! Wow, I loved the little pu'er that I got in the orange.
Oh yeah, those are so good. I love those. Those are a house favorite for sure.
Yeah, that was fantastic. I don't think I'd ever had that before. I have there used to be this awesome herbal tea house here. She was more focused on like medicinal herbs and stuff, and it got wiped out with the tornado a couple years ago. But I remember I took one of her classes, and she told me that like the tea at the grocery store and stuff, like there's quite a few bug parts in the tea because they're not hand sifting it, and so it just like goes through these machines, and so like bugs will be shredded in your tea.
Oh yeah.
Crazy.
Oh, I mean, and the same is true of our food. You know what I mean? That's the thing, is that it doesn't just, that goes back to when the emphasis is on profit and commodifying something, then the quality goes down. And that's, you can think of tea. Tea is this sacred plant, right? Tea is this plant medicine, and in its proper context, like what we're doing here, or like in the Japanese tea ceremony, it's this beautiful thing that enriches life and is a source of great joy and all kinds of other deep sentiments for people. And and it's good for you. But then when you commodify it, you end up with Lipton tea bags, and you're drinking bug parts, and you're drinking pesticides, and you're drinking plastic, microplastics, and you're drinking bleached paper. And the tea is destroying the environment because the tea that's being grown to put in those tea bags is optimized for yield and robustness. It's being sprayed down with chemicals to increase that yield and protect it from pests. And the people who grow that tea and who process that tea are neither tea farmers nor tea masters. They are employees. And they're not necessarily being paid a fair living wage either. This is a post-colonial, the Indian tea industry is post-colonial. And when you drink it, it's bad for you because of the toxins in it. So it's bad for the planet. It's bad for the plant. It's bad for the people who pick it and grow it. And it's bad for the people who drink it too. And the same is true of anything that is touched by capitalism, basically, and this imperative to maximize profit. Tobacco is a sacred plant. It was a central part of Native American culture, and it was smoked in peace pipes. And in the context of being smoked infrequently in a peace pipe as part of a ceremony, it's not bad, it's plant medicine. But then you commodify it and you put it into Marlboro Reds, and all of a sudden it is this extremely toxic, extremely addictive substance that is generating billions of dollars for the people who make it, destroying the earth, hurting the people who consume it, hurting society, causing a huge disease burden on the population. And you can say that about anything. Cacao, the sacred plant cacao, and then Hershey's bars. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah, which in America are mostly wax.
I know. Yeah. I mean, are they really? Is that really wax?
Yeah, there's a lot of wax.
I always used to say that the chocolate in China, China's got lots of great food. Chocolate is not one thing that China does well. And I always say that the chocolate in China is basically melted down brown crayons. And I didn't know that there was actually wax in Hershey bars.
Yeah, they say that like if you have like a Hershey's from here and a Hershey's from like England, they taste completely different. I've only ever had Hershey's from America. I mean, I don't eat that now, but I would be curious when I go to Europe to try something like that and see the difference.
I mean, Mexican Coke's different.
Yeah, exactly. Love me some Mexican Coke.
Yeah.
So when did you first fall in love with tea? Like what started your love for it, and how did that lead to the beginning of the West China Tea House?
My relationship with tea goes all the way back to before I can remember. So my dad's from Hong Kong, and so I'm Chinese American, and I grew up drinking Chinese tea. Not at home. When my dad drank tea at home, he would microwave a mug and put a Lipton tea bag in it and then put condensed milk in it. Because he grew up in British Hong Kong, really poor, and that's what they would do for tea. But we would go eat dim sum. You've had dim sum, right?
Yes, of course.
Yeah. It's the shit. So dim sum is this amazing cuisine from southern China, and the meal at which dim sum is the style of food, and the meal at which dim sum is consumed is called yum cha. Yum cha means drink tea in Cantonese, and so and we would go sit yum cha, go eat, drink tea on the weekends. And that's like kind of Cantonese brunch, before brunch was even a thing, they were doing this. And you go and you eat all these little dishes, these tiny little dishes, like a little steamer with like 4 dumplings in it, and everyone gets 1 dumpling. And then, a plate of vegetables or some chicken feet or some pork ribs or, squid, curry squid. And all these different dishes that really don't have anything to do with each other. The only thing they have in common, or noodles, is that they all go with tea. And tea is the centerpiece of that meal. Just like you could say that tapas is like wine food. It's like food designed to go with wine. Dim sum is food designed to go with tea. Specifically,
I never thought of it like that, but you're so right. Like they don't really go together, but the tea really is the centerpiece.
And the reason that we don't have a consciousness of that in America is because in America, dim sum is not centered around tea, because there's this idea that Americans don't appreciate tea. So they've taken that part out of it for Americans. But if you go to go eat dim sum in China, the first thing that they ask you, a real good dim sum place will bring you a tea menu. And the first thing that you order is the tea, because the tea is the centerpiece of the meal. And the teas that they drink will be, pu'er tea, fermented pu'er tea. They call that bolei cha. Jasmine tea, they call that heng bin in Cantonese. They'll do tie guan yin, ti guan yang, which is a roasted oolong. They do aged somei, white tea, they call sao mi in Cantonese. And so there are these classic teas that Cantonese people consume as the centerpiece of the meal dim sum. And I grew up drinking those. Specifically, the jasmine, the tie guan yin, and the pu'er was my favorite. Especially there's a blend of pu'er and chrysanthemum called gukbao. That was my favorite growing up. It's really nice. We do it here. We make it here. So I grew up drinking tea in that context. And it was always one of the few lifelines I had connecting me to my Chinese heritage. I didn't grow up speaking Chinese or doing any Chinese stuff. My mom is not Chinese. So Chinese was not spoken in my house. And so I had very few connections with my Chinese heritage.
When did you learn how to speak Chinese?
I learned like a chump in China. I had to learn as an adult. I was 28 years old before I started studying Chinese in earnest. And I did, So, for those of you out there who want to learn another language and you think that you missed the boat, you did not miss the boat. I'm fluent in Chinese, and I wasn't, 15 years ago, I wasn't. So
I mean, listening to you speak, even just the peppering it in, I'm like, oh, it's like I need to start again, because I was really strong in my studies, and then I had vocal surgery and I had to be silent for 75 days, and I lost a lot of my what I had learned, because it's really a language that you have to practice because the tones are so important. And I was so upset that I lost so much. I didn't dive back in, but I should. My brother's pretty fluent in Chinese. He's got a Chinese business minor. And I fell in love with Chinese because the language is so tonal. And as a singer, I really understood how to bend all the words properly. And my brother studying it, he was way better at the writing aspect, and the tones were a little bit harder for him. But it's such a cool language. I don't know that it's as hard to learn as, it's definitely complicated because one word can mean 5 different things depending on how you bend it. But I always love when I go to Chinese restaurants or stuff and I'm like, oh, I understand that word or that word or that word. I could pick out a few things that I knew in my 4 years of studying.
4 years is a lot of time to dedicate to studying a language. And you know what I know about the tones? The tones are so dependent on usage. Mm-hmm. Your ability to retain and use and know the tones is so deeply dependent on usage. I'm forgetting the tones because I haven't been back to China for 3 years now because of the pandemic. And
interesting to me about the Chinese language is you almost have to know, in English, you don't really necessarily have to know where you're going through the whole sentence. When you're talking, you can kind of make it up as you go. But in Chinese, a lot of stuff is very reversed to where you almost have what in English would be the end of the sentence is what begins the sentence. And so you kind of have to know where you're going with the sentence.
I think that's really a perspective thing, because a Chinese speaker learning English would probably say the same thing, because something goes at the end of our sentence. The object, for example, goes at the end of our sentence. And for them, they're like, well, you have to know what the object is before you start. It's very interesting. But I do find that Chinese being so different than English, when I'm in a Chinese language context and speaking only Chinese, I am fundamentally a different person than I am when I'm speaking English, because the limitations of the language. There's things that maybe my English self would say this in this context, but that can't be said in Chinese. There's no way to say it. Yeah. Likewise, in English, there are times that if I was speaking Chinese, I would say this, and it's one sentiment. But I can't express that in English. There's no way to express that in English. So I express some completely different sentiment in the same situation. And I end up, my sense of humor is different. The kind of jokes that I make are different. The kind of things that I would say are just different, because in Chinese culture, the kind of things that you'll say are just different.
Mm-hmm. I took you off on this language tangent, but keep going with what brought you to your love to tea.
Sure. So I grew up drinking tea. But I didn't do tea service. I didn't do gongfu cha. And really my tea drinking was pretty limited to the restaurants, because we couldn't get that nice tea that they had at the restaurants. It was imported by the restaurant along with a bunch of their stuff. They didn't sell it. And so at home, I just drank my dad's, Lipton tea, and I didn't drink it very much because I didn't really like it. And I didn't really have a strong interest in tea until beyond eating it, drinking it at restaurants, until I was in college and I went to a tea house called Chaikana, tea shop called Chaikana in Santa Cruz, California, which is where I went to school, owned by a man named David Wright, who now owns Hidden Peak Tea House, also in Santa Cruz, which is the spiritual successor of Chaikana. At the time, it was this tiny little like shotgun house style room. It was like, you ever see Gremlins?
Yeah.
You know the shop where he gets Gizmo from? Like the junk shop, and there's all this weird stuff everywhere. It was kind of like that. It was this like dark, very poorly lit room, like small room with all of these very arcane looking things, tiny little teapots and, like little tea pets and, various bamboo items and ceramic items and just all over the walls. And I didn't know what anything was. And I went to the back and there's this, white guy wearing Chinese robes, pouring tea out of a little teapot. And I was like, what is this? He's like, this is gongfu cha. And I was like, is it like a tea ceremony? He's like, no, it's more like a practice. I was like, oh, cool. And he served me some silver needle, white tea in a little teacup and from a stone teapot. And I was like, this is awesome. I want to do this. And it clicked, immediately for me. And, part of it was like, wow, this is Chinese culture. This is like a really beautiful, aesthetically beautiful and elegant expression of Chinese culture. And I'd seen people doing it in like Kung Fu movies before, but I had never drank it. No one had ever served it to me growing up in Houston. And I'd never encountered it in Houston.
You're from Houston too? I'm from Houston.
You're from Houston? What? Where in Houston?
Kind of Memorial Galleria area.
That's Houston. Usually when people say they're from Houston,
right?
They mean they're from Katy or Conroe or something like that.
Or what's the other one? What's the other one that everyone says? But it's not Houston.
Or like Sugarland or something.
Yeah, Sugarland. My house was on like Chimney Rock and Memorial. So
hell yeah! What up? I'm from Montrose and Westheimer.
No way!
713 in the loop. What's up?
Number is 713.
Oh, is it really? You still have your cell phone is a 713 number?
My cell phone is a 713 number.
Wow. Cool. Man, you've had it a long time then.
What high school did you go to?
I went to Strake Jesuit. I went to a private school.
Yeah, I know Strake. I went to Episcopal.
Okay. What? Crazy. That's awesome. Yeah. So as you know, Strake's like smack in the middle of Chinatown.
Yeah.
And so that was like my upbringing was like, being in, the first place we lived in Houston was in that Sharpstown, Chinatown area when I was a baby, right? And then when I was 7, we moved to like River Oaks. We weren't rich. We were the poorest people in River Oaks, but we were there. Yeah. And then we moved to Montrose when I was in high school, and I spent my high school years in like the Montrose and Westheimer back in the 90s when it was still like the queer enclave back in the day.
Yeah, Montrose is a cool area. I've definitely done my fair share of partying over there in high school.
Oh yeah. Wow, cool. I had no idea you were from Houston.
I love that. Yes. So when did you move to Austin?
What was that?
When did you move to Austin?
I moved to Austin. So I went to school in Santa Cruz. So I left Houston in 2002, which is when I graduated from high school. And then I moved to Santa Cruz that year. I lived in Santa Cruz until about 2007, did my 4 years and then was there for a little longer. And then moved to Austin in 2008 because my sisters were living here. My sisters went to UT. And so they were living in Austin. So I moved. I knew I wanted to go be closer to my family. Mm-hmm. I didn't want to go move back to Houston. Yeah. And so I was like, well, Austin's cool, and so I moved to Austin 2008. And I was in Austin from 2008 to 2010. Then I moved to China in 2010. I was there for about 3 years in Chengdu.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I never spent any time really in Austin growing up, and this year. I've been twice for music festivals, and it's a really cool place. As a vegan, I love that there's so much food I can eat.
Oh yeah, yeah. There's tons of vegan food. Yeah, it's definitely very, very accessible for lots of different diets here.
It's fantastic. So you host online events, and you have a really awesome. Oh, I lost.
Oh, hold on. 1 second. There. Sorry, I forgot to put it on. Let me put it on Do Not Disturb real quick. All right. Okay. Sorry about that.
No, you're fine. So you host a lot of online events, and you have a really awesome, active online community. Can you talk a little bit about the kinds of events that you hold, and like how people can get involved with your community, even if they are not in Austin?
Absolutely. Yeah, we do lots of online events. Some of those are like live streams and podcasts and things like that. I guess we, as far as like interactive stuff, I teach classes. I'm going to be teaching my next class Sunday at 11 a.m. Central Time. Every Sunday at 11 a.m. The first, second, and fourth Sundays of the month, I teach a class, and it's the intro, advanced, and internal classes that I do those 3 weeks. And those are fun. I really like teaching over Zoom. Mm-hmm. Because I didn't think I was going to like it. I thought it was because we started doing it because the pandemic, because we couldn't teach in person. And I thought that I was going to not like it at all. But actually, I really like it because, one, I can have like a camera close up on my tea set and what I'm doing, and a face camera at the same time. And I get to meet people from all over the world. I've had students from Venezuela, from Singapore, from Australia, from all kinds of different places all over the world, Malaysia, France, Belgium, and they've come and taken classes with me, and I think that's really amazing and awesome. And so there's those. For our members, we do a monthly members meetup, which is online, but our members are mostly in Austin, so we might phase that out because it doesn't really make sense. And then we do a Tea of the Month subscription that goes out all over the country. It's not international yet because the shipping's crazy and unpredictable, and the shipping's included, but we do a Tea of the Month subscription. It's $30 a month, and we send you a package. Yeah, it's really good. We send you a package of like 3 or 4 different teas to try, and then we have a monthly Zoom meeting where people who are subscribed to the Tea of the Month can join the Zoom, and we taste those teas together.
Oh my gosh, that's
not all
fun. I'm so joining that.
Yeah, definitely. That's one of our favorite community, like online community events. And then we have a YouTube show, a YouTube channel called Tea House Ghost. And there's one show is Gong Fu Tea Cha, which is our informational show, and that's just me talking at a camera and doing tea stuff. And that's cool if you're really nerdy about tea and want to learn about tea. But then we just added a new show called Tea 60, which is where we are sitting at the tea table, having tea, having a conversation, and we have a 360-degree camera in the middle of it. And we are recording the conversation. And it's basically like a big group podcast with a 360-degree camera. And yeah, you can go watch it. We just released a new episode yesterday. And you can take your phone on YouTube and you can look around and see the faces of the different people drinking tea together and talking and basically be part of the conversation. And then we do releases of that with live chats. And then we're going to be doing a series of live streams in May for Asian and Pacific Islander History Month, that's the month of May. So I'm going to be doing a series of live streams with Asian and Pacific Island American creators and influencers over the course of that month. And then David's Tea, which is a big tea company, is also going to highlight us as API-owned tea business, which we're actually kind of the minority. Surprisingly, most of the tea industry, the specialty tea industry in America is definitely dominated by non-Asian people.
Really?
Oh yeah, absolutely. The niche specialty tea industry certainly is.
That's super interesting. That's so amazing that you have so many facets to your business. What was it like building your business, and like where does that kind of creativity come from you to like, have so many different elements? Like, is that mostly coming from you and just your desire to like expand and bring tea to as many people as possible? Like, what's your creative process like behind, building your business and building it in many different areas?
So my role in the company is as the visionary. I used to be everything. I used to, make the posts and order the tea and ship the tea and, do everything. But that's not actually a sustainable way to run a business. So my role now.
So I'm gonna use my tea to help me relax, but I hope point.
Yeah, sister. I know. I feel you. I know what it's like. And that's just the hustle, right? That's just like what it is to be an entrepreneur and a business owner is you got to put in the work and do the time. And people are always like, why don't you delegate? You can't just delegate. You have to build out a system first, and you have to be able to run up and down that system with your eyes closed and backwards. Then you can delegate,
I get that a lot of why don't you just delegate, or why don't you just hire people? And I'm like, okay, do you want to go through all the different categories that are required, like, and all of the different things that I do in a day? Like, it's not that easy to just delegate, because sometimes, like, if you're just delegating to people that don't know your system backwards and forwards, then you're holding their hand and you have to teach them. I guess sometimes it's not always the most time efficient to delegate. So.
Well, and then you have to correct mistakes, that they're making, not because it's their fault, but because you didn't have a comprehensive system and protocols built out beforehand. And it's a 40-hour-a-week job to build the systems and protocols. And that's what people don't really understand. It's like saying, delegate is like saying make money. It's like, oh, you've got a cash flow problem, we'll make more money. Well, it's like, okay, yeah, great. There's a lot of stuff that goes into that. But that aside, where did this all come from? It was very organic. This business arose very organically. I didn't start this business because I wanted to start a business. I started this business because I wanted to get one box of tea over from China. And so this is kind of the fun origin story of West China tea. So 2003, I get into Gongfu Cha. I am serving tea as a hobbyist, drinking tea, buying tea, serving tea, as a sharing tea culture as a hobbyist, teaching classes as an amateur. All the way up until 2009, I get my first tea-related job in Austin, working at Jade Leeds Tea House. That was my first taste of the tea business. And it was just kind of like me as a kid doing a fun job of something that I love, enjoying it, making a paycheck, not worrying. I did not have any intentions of being a tea business owner at that time. Then I moved to China in 2010. I spent about 3 years in Chengdu, but I traveled all over China, all over southwestern China, looking, when I had time off, when I had a vacation time, I would go and I was doing environmental research there. That was what I was doing in China. What I was there for had nothing to do with tea. But yeah, my background is in marine biology. So I was doing like freshwater ecosystem management and remediation when I was there. But when I had time off, I would go visit the tea mountains in Sichuan, in Yunnan, in Guangxi, these southwestern Chinese provinces. And I met these tea farmers, and my first real encounter with like real farm direct Chinese tea. This is after 7 years of being a tea enthusiast in America and buying the best tea that I could afford, back in the 2000s. Going to my office in Chengdu, of the Cura office, the Chengdu Urban Rivers Association. First day in Chengdu, going to my new office, and in the break room of my office, there was just a canister of loose Su Maofeng green tea, Sichuanese green tea. And I put some in a paper cup and I put some hot water on it, and I drank it. And I was like, oh my God, this is the best green tea I've ever had. Like, what is this? And my coworkers were like, this is just regular tea. This is what you serve. This isn't even what you serve to guests who come visit you. This is what you drink on your own. This is just your everyday regular tea. But it was organic and it was farm direct, because the organization I worked for worked with Sichuanese farmers. And so they were getting this tea. I don't even think they were paying for it. I think they were getting it as a gift from one of these farmers that they had helped get set up with various wastewater management systems and for, composting and help them get organic. And they weren't certified organic, but it was what we would consider organically grown, because our organization's job was to help rural Sichuanese farmers stop using fertilizers and pesticides and herbicides, start composting, start building them anaerobic digesters, gray water treatment, et cetera, composting toilets, et cetera. And so that was our job. And so this tea that I was drinking was so ordinary as to be anonymous. They're just like, this is just, we just call it tea, just regular tea. And I was like, wow, this is so good. This is the best green tea I've ever had. And this is me as like a hardcore tea enthusiast being like, this is the best green tea I've ever had. And that was my experience again and again. Not to say every tea that I tried in China was the best that I had, but every farm direct tea that I tried in China, every tea that I tried that I was getting directly from the people who grew it or who processed it, was in a completely different echelon than anything I had tasted imported tea in America, even very expensive teas that I tried in America. And so after 3 years, I moved back to Austin. I brought some of this tea back with me. I shared it with my tea friends from back in the Jade Leaves days. They were still drinking tea, and we drank it. We drank it all. I didn't bring that much back. I just brought it back with me in my luggage. I didn't make a shipment, and we drank all of it, and I was out of tea. And I was like, well, I'm not going to buy this overpriced American imported tea. I'm just going to get
that. You can't live life not having it.
Exactly. And so I messaged my farmer friends. I was like, hey, I want to get some tea. Ship it to Chengdu, because they're not going to ship internationally. Ship it to Chengdu. And then I got my old roommate, Lance, who was still living in Chengdu. I was like, hey, Lance, I'm going to send you some tea. Some of it's for you, for your trouble. And then the rest of it, put it in a box and ship it to me in Austin. No big deal, right? And he did. And then it got sent back to China, because you can't ship tea from China to America without FDA clearance. It's an agricultural product. And it wasn't just my money, it was my friend's money, because some of my friends had thrown in on the order. They're like, oh, you're getting some more of that tea? I want some. Let me get some. And I wasn't selling it to them. They were just adding to the order, and they were helping me pay for shipping, And this box got sent back. It probably had about $700 worth of tea in it, including shipping. It got sent back to China, and I had to spend the next 8 months in my free time, because I had a job. I was doing medical research then. I had a job, and in my free time, when I could make time, I had to dig through the very confusing FDA website and try to figure out what the hell I need to do to get this box over here legally. And eventually I figured it out, and it requires you to be a business. An individual can't register an FDA food handling facility. You can't. Only a business can do that. And so I went down to the county clerk. I filed a DBA as West China Tea Company. I wasn't trying to give my actual business a name. This was not supposed to be a business. This was to get one box, right?
One box of average tea.
What's that?
One box of what the Chinese would call average tea.
Exactly. Yeah, just everyday tea. But I called it West China Tea Company because I was like, well, the first people to bring tea from China to the West were the East India Company. So I'm gonna, West China Tea Company, and all my tea back then was from Western China. Now my tea is from all over China, but still a lot of it is from Western China, because that's where I lived, was in Western China. So West China Tea Company, and then I got the box, and I was happy enough just drinking it, and gave my friends their tea, and I didn't drinking my tea, and kept doing my medical research job, and I didn't have any intention of actually starting business in earnest until a couple of months later. The company that I worked for folded, went out of business, and I was unemployed. But I had some tea, and I had a business license. I had a sales and use tax permit and the legal right to sell tea. So I was like, well, I guess I'll just lean into this and start selling tea. And I started by renting a room for $300 a month in my friend Emily Spikeman's house, and it was / jewelry studio. And she of Clementine and Company Jewelry. She's amazing. And I would just serve tea out of this room in her house for free on Tuesdays and Fridays. Called it office hours. Back then, this is 2012, 2013, nobody in Austin knew about Gongfu Cha or Chinese tea, really. Nobody knew that it was something they should pay to go do.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just started doing it for free, and people would buy tea at the end if they wanted to, or tip me. And we started doing farmers markets, music festivals, concerts, camping festivals, house parties, serving tea, like, New Year's parties at warehouse parties, raves, serving tea at these different events. And gradually the interest grew and the community grew. We got our first serious tea house was behind Spider House, which is like an Austin institution, now defunct, RIP. Was a 200 square foot room under a tattoo parlor. And we'd be drinking tea and we'd hear people like screaming and stomping their feet as they're getting tattoos upstairs. And it was we were there for about 3 years. And by the end, from doing the farmers markets, doing the outside events, we didn't have a sign on the business. It wasn't registered anywhere. You just had to know by word of mouth that it was there, and then knock on the door and someone would let you in. It was like a speakeasy. And but by the end of our time there, it was so packed full that there was no room to sit on the floor. People were sitting in each other's laps. And so we moved to this space, West China Tea House, which originally was called Guanyin Tea House, 2017. And so you've been here, you saw the front room. You didn't see the room that I'm in now, and you didn't see the tasting room, I don't think, because you were there right at the end. But we're now in a 3,000 square foot space, and we'll have these big parties. We'll have dance parties with DJs, and it's an alcohol-free space. We just serve tea. We don't do any alcohol whatsoever. And
I love it. Somewhere I read that you were talking about how tea is so fundamentally inclusive and how it's such a great social thing because it's not alcohol centric, but it is, socially centric when you do the ceremony. And I thought that was really cool. And I was like, I should start hosting some tea ceremonies here because I hate drinking. I'm not really an alcohol person. I don't like the way it makes me feel. But I love obviously having social events and going out. So you should start hosting some tea ceremonies.
Absolutely. You absolutely should. It's really magical. It's really magical what happens when you invite people over or just to start serving tea. People show up, and the space that it holds and the ability for tea to hold that unifying space that alcohol usually does in society. And I'm the same way. I don't like the way alcohol makes me feel, and I have had traumatic experiences being in relationships with people with alcoholism.
Same.
Yeah. And
after you go through that, it's also like it's hard to kind of tone that anxiety down when you are with somebody that's even just drinking and they don't have problems with it. There's still kind of always that like, I'm kind of uncomfortable here.
Yeah, because you never know when someone's just going to turn. When they're going to tip past that point and it's going to be crazy and unaccountable. And yeah, I'm sorry that you had to go through that. And I'm sorry that I had to go through that too. Yeah. I've always had kind of like a neutral attitude towards alcohol. And I've never been like someone who specifically abstains from alcohol. Yeah. But after that, like I actually have a little bit of a beef with alcohol, and not with the substance, but with its role in our culture and with alcohol culture.
I feel the same. And definitely through that relationship, I stop drinking entirely as to like hopefully like inspire them to like not drink when we were out, or I'd be like, I'm not drinking, like maybe just one drink, or like always trying to kind of encourage not doing that. And so yeah, now like I mean I'll have one at a party or something, but still it's not. I mean, even when I was in high school and like when everyone has that, like, we're breaking free and rebelling and drinking, I was usually the DD because I was just like, I'm not really interested. Like my parents have always let me have a sip of their wine if I wanted it. Since I was a kid, it was never this like forbidden fruit thing.
Right. Yeah. Likewise for me, here's the thing is I love beer. I love drinking beer. I love the way beer tastes. I love the craft. I love all the different kinds. I think it's awesome, like as a thing, and I never drink it because I don't like the way it makes me feel. Mm-hmm. Same with whiskey. I have a deep appreciation for good whiskey, good Scotch.
Whiskey's my drink if I'm gonna have it. Good whiskey.
Yeah, and I love it and I appreciate it, and I never drink it because I don't like the way it makes me feel. Same with mezcal. I love mezcal. I think it's amazing. I appreciate the craft. I love the culture. I don't ever drink it because I don't like the way it makes me feel. And I don't go to bars because I don't like being around drunk people.
Yeah.
And
when I started really stuck, because I had some autoimmune stuff come up, like I don't know, it's probably been like 5 years now, but I was dealing with hypothyroidism and rashes and like all this stuff that, Western medicine was like, over medicating me for, basically being like, you're going to be on thyroid medicine for the rest of your life. And we don't know where your rashes are coming from. And like, more medicine, more medicine. Oh, your skin is bad. Let's just put you on amoxicillin for 3 years.
Oh
Like,
God.
I was so over medicated. And didn't really, I'm Greek, Italian, and Texan. So like food awareness was not really like a thing either. I just ate, meat and cheese and like all kinds of stuff and gluten. And then
Right.
I started really studying food and its healing abilities. And then I went plant-based, and then I went even further and started, studying about the liver and detoxing. And that's where my love for, plant-based food science, and also, things like tea and all the herbals and their healing abilities in the body, like that, my love just seriously grew for that, because I reversed all of my illnesses. I no longer have thyroid issues. My rashes are gone. My skin is great. Like my energy levels are awesome, and I know how to treat things now when they come up. Like even things that people don't even consider symptoms, like eye floaters or tinnitus. Like I had all of it's gone. I had food allergies to, like, I was allergic to the spice thyme. And, there's a lot of things that we consider to be sensitivities or allergies, but it's actually like those things are so powerfully antiviral that when you're eating them, it's killing off and causing so much die off in the body that you get a symptom and you're like, oh, it's that food's fault, but it's really the pathogen in your body. So I got super into, food and herbs and their impact on the body. And now, you can look at my blood panels and they're, pretty perfect when they were a disaster before. So anytime I can talk to anyone that's in any space like that, I'm just so fascinated with, personal experiences. Like, do you use Chinese tea in the way that herbal teas are used for healing parts of the body? Like, is that something that interests you?
I am not an herbalist, although many of our staff and team members here are herbalists. And I very seldom do like therapy of any kind. I do take some nootropics. I do take cordyceps. I do like ginseng, things like that. So I take a lot of like tonic herbs. Rarely do I treat myself with like herbal medicine. I will say this: my background is in Western science, and I have work experience in medicine, like Western medicine, when I was a medical researcher. And I deeply appreciate the scientific method, and I deeply appreciate the work that the medical professionals go into to learning about the human body. Mm-hmm. And I will only seek Western medical treatment as a last resort. Yeah. I will always
kind of always say, like, I don't hate Western medicine. I just think Western medicine to me is way more diagnostic and acute when there's like something that's like, sometimes you really need something quickly, or something's, gone south. But I think we turn to medicine too quickly and too frequently, even just over the counter stuff, people just, popping all kinds of things.
And I would say that the problem isn't isn't medical science or even allopathic medicine or even the Western medical like modus. It's the intersection between capitalism and medicine. Yeah. The idea that the medical industry is a business that seeks to make money. Because if your job is to make money, then you're not your shareholders do not want to see you healing people. Mm-hmm. Because every person that you heal is one less customer. Yeah. What is good for your bottom line is for people to remain ill, mm-hmm. Indefinitely and be dependent on medication indefinitely. And that's where we find ourselves. And that's why we have a fentanyl epidemic in this country, an opioid epidemic in this country. It's not because it's just such an addictive substance. It's because it's overprescribed. Mm-hmm. And it's because there is a financial prerogative for medical professionals and for the medical industry to get people to buy more and more and more of it. And so anyway, that's a little bit
fascinating. Doctor's visit, like a couple months ago, it was like right before Christmas. I got sick and I treated it with everything I knew how to treat. And I just had this cough that would not go away. And I finally went to the clinic, and he was like, I don't really know what's wrong with you, but like, here's a bunch of things to take. And it was, steroids, antibiotics, an inhaler, like all this stuff. And I was like, would you take this? Would you take all of this? And he was like, honestly, no. Like I would drink a lot of green tea. I would have a lot of ginger juice. But he's like, just get, he's like, I would maybe, take some of the cough syrup. And if you don't feel better, start adding in the other things. But he was like, just drink a lot of green tea. And I was like, then why am I buying all this medication? And you're telling me as the doctor, you wouldn't do this if you were in my position. It was really fascinating.
And what's really fascinating is that if a doctor fails to prescribe something that is this industry standard for a given thing, and then you, the patient, decide to sue them, their liability is higher because they didn't prescribe you all these standardized pharmaceuticals. And so not only do they have a financial prerogative, they actually have a legal prerogative to prescribe those things. And at the end of the day, it's, people like to villainize physicians. And I'm not saying that there are no physicians out there that are cynically trying to make money off people's illness. But I believe that the majority of medical professionals, doctors and nurses and specialists do want to help people.
Absolutely.
And the hands are very much tied by the pharmaceutical industry and by HMOs and by the insurance industry in America, which is this big, powerful complex of businesses. But
it's crazy.
But to answer your question, I do use Chinese herbs. It's not something that I'm knowledgeable about, and it's not something that I have extensive experience with. I will use them when I need them, and I have people that I know who are knowledgeable and experienced and qualified to prescribe those sort of things and to do those things that I turn to for those needs.
What's your favorite tea of all the teas? Like, what's your go-to, or like one that just has like a really special place for you?
It's a little tricky to say one particular tea. The category of tea that I like the most is Sheng Pu'er. So pu'er, but not the fermented kind, the unfermented kind. Although it does ferment naturally over time. I would say it's a tricky one. I don't necessarily have one specific favorite, but there's one that's very dear to my heart that is called Dumroy, and it's a Sheng Pu'er from 2006. Nothing too special about it. It's just it was a really good year. It was a really good cake. It was made by Li Shulin, who made your tea. It's now extinct because his house burned down, and all of it was burnt. And so there's not much of it left. And I have a few cakes of it left that I saved. And luckily we were able to raise.
Rationing it for special occasions.
Yeah, rationing it for special occasions. And it's just a really, really good, solid tea. It's probably not the best tea I've ever had, but it's one that's very dear to my heart.
What's the rarest tea you've ever had? Rarest or most expensive?
I had some pu'er from the 1930s once. I had some zhang cha from 1964. That was very, very rare and expensive. Bug poop tea is very rare and expensive. I've had that. That is what it sounds like. You've got some bugs. They eat the tea leaves. They poop it out.
No.
I'm serious. Yeah, you boil it and you drink it.
How do you collect? Like, do the bugs just like sit in a thing so that they're like? How do they make that tea?
The bug poop is kind of all like they've got the kind of bug that does this makes like some kind of silk, and so the bug poop is all like these little pellets all stuck together with this webbing, and it's like in like the crook of a tree, right? So you've got a tea tree and the bugs are eating it, and there's just like this webbing with poop in it just all over the tree. That's wild harvested. Wow. You can also intentionally do it. You got some bugs in a container, you give them the leaves, they eat it. And when they're done, there's all of this bug poop is in the container. And it is. Yeah, it is.
My dad, one time he got an elephant poop coffee, but I remember that was something that he got. I don't know if he ever tried it though. It has like a special, it has like a special coffee pot too that you make it in.
I mean, I wouldn't not try it. I would definitely try it. I mean, but elephant poop's not that gnarly. It's like cow poop, cow poop, you can burn it as fuel. It's not bad. But But yeah, bug poop tea, that's a really rare one. And I'd say that, you know, one of the rarest teas that we carry are like Taiping Hokway is a very famous green tea that only a very small amount of it can be produced. And most of it's counterfeit that's out on the market, but we have some real authentically produced Taiping Hokway. We're doing pre-sales for that right now. We sell out every year. It's really expensive. It's like $70 for, you know, a couple pots worth of tea, but we sell it out every year because it's a really good tea, and we're just about done with pre-sales right now. Actually, Sinya, who I think maybe you met, I don't know. What's up, yo? She's from China. She's one of our team members. She's from Anhui, which is where Taiping Hokway is from. So we're doing a promotion on it right now where we're giving people 20% off on that Anhui tea. But that's one. And then we do single tree gushu cha, which is pu'er tea from ancient trees, from one specific ancient tree. Yeah, those are some of the rare teas that we've had.
That's cool. Do you have a favorite tea pet? And can you tell everybody what? Oh, hi, doggy. Can you tell everyone what tea pets are, and do you have a favorite?
I do have a favorite tea pet, I have a couple favorite tea pets. One is a fish. Another is a frog that looks like a pumpkin. And another one is Zhonghui, the demon queller, who's a god in Chinese mythology. But tea pets are like, this is a tea pet. This is the tea pet that I'm using right now. His name is Chanchu. He is a three-legged toad from the moon. You can see his three legs here. And his story. And so what is a tea pet? A tea pet is a little clay figurine that's made out of the same type of clay that, you know, the really nice teapots are made out of. And the story with these teapots is that, you know, you use these teapots, they're unglazed and they stain. You can see the stain on the lid of this teapot right now. And that stain is a patina, and it carries the flavor of the tea and the essence of the tea. And so, like your teapot, for example. And so traditionally, when we make tea in these type of teapots, people will, you don't have to, but they will dedicate them to one type of tea. This is just for red tea. Yep, this one's just for red tea. I only use this for red tea. My first Yixing teapot, I made every kind of tea in. So there's nothing wrong with making every kind. But the tradition, the custom is to dedicate them because it's like a gumbo pot, you know, or like a cast iron pan. It gets the patina and it adds to the flavor of the tea and actually makes the tea better as you make tea in it. And it also stains and changes the color of the pot. And so these little tea pets, presumably teapot makers started making them just with the same clay. They're like, oh, they're bored. They had some leftover clay. They made these little figurines. They started firing them and selling them. And then people were like, oh, cool, a little statue, neat. And then one day someone decided to put it on their chapan, their tea tray, and pour their tea over it, because in Gongfu Cha, we don't drink the first steeping. We pour off the first steeping. And so they noticed that when you pour the first steeping on the little tea pet, the tea pet also stains and takes on a patina and gets darker. But because we're not drinking from the tea pets, you don't have to dedicate them to any particular kind of tea. And so when you pour tea on a tea pet, I mean, the tea pets are by no means necessary. They're very extraneous to the process, but they're cute and they're fun. And the cool part is that you can look at your tea pet and you can see this guy, he might be hard to tell on the camera, but he's darker on top than he is on his belly. And that's because he's been getting lots of tea. And you can see the staining on his underside too. And as you use a tea pet, they get darker and darker and more lustrous. And you can see how long you've been making tea. And they represent different things. For example, this chanchu, the toad from the moon, represents wealth. And fish represent abundance, especially koi, the carp, represents abundance. And turtles represent long life. And lotuses represent Buddhism and Buddha nature. And, a bull represents the year of the ox. And a pig represents the year of the pig. And all the things that go along with that, etc. Rabbits.
It's like giving an offering to that intention.
It is. Yeah, you're calling in. It's just like giving, like when you put oil on a Catholic statue or butter on a Hindu statue. You know, you're invoking the spirit that is represented by that statue. And in this case, I'm invoking wealth, because that's what Chanchu represents.
You want to see my really, really ridiculous tea pet that I have today?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
This is my peeing Buddha.
Nice. Ooh.
So you soak him in cold water and he fills up with the cold water. And then when you pour your tea on him, the hot tea pushes the cold water out and he pees.
Are you just going to tell us about it, or are you going to show us?
I forgot to soak him in the cold water.
He's not ready yet. Yeah, he's camera shy.
But oh my gosh, when I bought, he actually came with this tea set, and the little Chinese lady that was in the shop, she was so excited to show me the peeing Buddha, and it was just one of the funniest moments of my life. This little
Peeing tea pets are
showed me the peeing Buddha.
Oh yeah. The peeing tea pet is a classic. Everybody loves the peeing tea pet. It's
so funny. It's just a little bit of joy. If you could have tea with any famous person, living or dead, who would you choose?
That's a big one.
And if it's hard to pick just one, you can design your perfect tea ceremony with like a few.
Ooh. Okay. If I was having tea with because I would want to have tea with a group of people. Mm-hmm. I mean, I have to say Lu Yu is one of them. He's the father of tea culture. The reason that we drink tea and do any of this stuff is because of him and his book, The Cha Jing. I would also say, man, that's a tough one. I mean, I want to say Nina Simone, because I love Nina Simone a lot, and I would just love to be able to be with her and to be in her presence and have tea with her. And on that similar note, Angela Davis. I like Angela Davis, who's alive, and I would love to have tea with her because I just love to have her at the tea table and hear her contribution to the conversation. Mm-hmm. I want to say also, who do I really like? It's on the tip of my tongue. Fred Hampton, who started the Rainbow Coalition, which is kind of I want to have tea with him, but if I can also warn him that he was going to get assassinated by the FBI, that would be cool. So I've got a little bit of an ulterior motive of changing history there. But even if I can't, I just love to talk to him because I really appreciate him and his contribution, and I feel like more people should know about him and what he attempted to do.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to look him up. I don't know him.
Fred Hampton, assassinated by the FBI at the age of 21, was a Black Panther who was bringing together in Chicago street gangs, various street gangs, and turning them into social organizations, social justice organizations. He started the Rainbow Coalition. He brought together the Black Panthers. He brought together the Young Lords, which were a Latin American street gang. He brought together groups of poor Appalachian whites who were also street gangs. He brought these people together in what he called the Rainbow Coalition, and he was fighting for collective liberation. Not just for one group of people, but for the collective liberation of all different people by joining together in solidarity to free ourselves. And because of the work that he was doing, he was assassinated by the FBI illegally in the Quantel program, which was an illegal FBI program that saw lots of different social justice leaders assassinated and lots of different organizations infiltrated. It was illegal. It was covert. No one has ever been held accountable for it. Fred Hampton, the people who killed Fred Hampton in his bed, sleeping next to his pregnant girlfriend at the age of 21, were never arrested. There were no charges ever filed for this illegal assassination of this man who was trying to free people. And Fred Hampton would be at my table for sure. And
this is going to be an interesting tea ceremony.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I would say, I want to, get some more Chinese people in there, maybe Wu Lijun, who is another important influential figure in tea. And gosh, yeah, that's all I can think of off the top of my head. Definitely some of those folks. Maybe Alan Watts or something like that, someone cool like that.
Are there any other creative uses that you have for tea aside from drinking it? Do you ever cook with it or do anything like more than the ritual?
I'm not the most creative person when it comes to tea. I mostly drink it, serve it and drink it. I mean, there are lots of cool things you can do, and I do cook with it sometimes. I like to make ochazuke, which is a Japanese dish where you've got rice and stuff, cold rice and stuff, food on it, and then you pour hot green tea on it, and then you eat it with a spoon. That's really nice. And there's like a shrimp dish from Hangzhou called Longjing shrimp, where you use Longjing tea to make some shrimp, and that's really nice.
Yeah, there's a tea house, Ching Cha in Boston not Boston, DC, that they make these tea eggs and tea noodles that are just, the noodles are so incredible. And the tea eggs.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Tea eggs is classic. I grew up eating those. Yeah, I mean, we compost our spent tea leaves. So, I don't know if that's creative or not, but it's something that we do.
Yeah.
We don't, and I've used it as medicine for like a canker sore or like eye irritation, like a sty or something. You make a compress out of tea leaves, wet tea leaves. I've done that. And you can dry the tea leaves out and they act as a deodorizer. Like you can put them in your fridge you put them in a little pillow in the fridge. Yep. Tea absorbs odors, which is why you should never store your tea with other smells. It should be sealed and it should be away from spices, herbs, scented candles, essential oils, Chinese medicine, cleansers, soaps, anything that has a strong smell, perfumes, obviously incense. Tea needs to be sealed away from those things because it will absorb those smells.
That's very interesting. What would be a tea that you would recommend for like balancing mental health or anxiety, like a tea for chilling out?
Aged white tea, and I will say the tea has chemicals in it that are good for anxiety, and the practice of preparing and serving tea in this style itself, I think, has more value to the end of focus and calm and being free from anxiety than the chemicals alone in the tea do. I would say that the practice of making and serving tea, it's a very, especially by yourself, it's a very meditative practice, and the act of waiting for the water to boil, waiting for the tea to steep, paying attention to the smells and the sounds and the feeling of the tea, and then taking the time to mindfully drink the tea with intention and reflecting on where the tea came from. And, then, after you've done some of that, sharing it with other people. But the process itself, I find, has a lot of therapeutic value beyond just the chemicals in the tea itself. But if we're talking just tea, just the substance, aged white tea, and heicha, the fermented teas, specifically the fermented teas from Hunan, have this very very strong chill out vibe.
When I was there, I asked for a tea that enhances creativity, and he gave me the purple grace. Are there any others that you would say are great teas for creativity or like boosting the, that part of our minds?
I would say I love Sheng Pu'er for focus and creativity, which is what Purple Grace is. I love purple tea for creativity. I would say in that same vein, ultraviolet, which is, that's the same tea that you're drinking now, but as a red tea instead of a Sheng Pu'er. So any purple teas are good for that. I'd say fresh white teas are good for creativity as opposed to aged white teas, which are good for chilling out. And low and medium oxidation oolongs, like Anshi and Phoenix oolongs specifically.
I love that purple teas are the ones for creativity because purple in color theory is creativity and, boldness and authenticity. And that's, the heart of my brand. And I didn't know that about purple teas until I asked, and they were like telling me, all these purple teas are, what I would give you for creativity. And I was like, yes, that's so cool.
That's amazing. That checks out, it checks out. And even when people don't know they're drinking a purple tea, even when the tea doesn't look purple and they are not informed that they're drinking a purple tea, it has that same effect. It has that kind of electric, inspiring effect. And, what we're talking about is we're not talking about Chinese medicine or anything right now. This is this very abstracted study of the effects of tea in a very subjective way, as far as I've experienced them in my life, you know.
Yeah. And do you drink tea all day, every day?
I
Has
do.
there been a day where you haven't had tea since you opened the shop?
Oh, sure. Yeah. When I had COVID, I didn't drink tea, not for any real good reason, just because I was too tired. And I wasn't at the tea house, I was at home. And I just don't make tea at home that much anymore because I drink tea so much at the tea house and I'm here all the time. So there was like 4 or 5 days when I had COVID that I didn't drink any tea. And there's times when I'm fasting. There are times when I fast just on water and I don't drink tea. Sometimes if I'm traveling and I don't have time to make tea or I don't have my teaware with me, then I won't make or drink tea. And there's plenty of times. I would say that rarely do I go more than a couple of days without drinking tea. But it's noteworthy that I drink a ton of tea. I mean, I'll drink like 4 or 5 pots of tea on a normal day, every day for the last 20 years of my life, pretty much, more often than not. And if I don't have tea, I do not crave it, which is interesting, which is different than tobacco.
Yeah.
It's different than sugar, and it's different than coffee too. You know, people develop these cravings for coffee, and I don't know anyone who has a craving for tea the way that you do for an addictive substance. I don't know anyone that, even people who are like going hard in the paint, drinking tea like me, no one I know has ever reported having any kind of compulsion to.
Yeah. I mean, tea is extremely central to my life, especially being a singer. I don't even take water on stage. Like mucilaginous teas are, always my go-to, but I drink tea all day, every day, way more than I drink anything else.
Yep.
There's one blend of tea that I have. There's a lot of elm barks and things in the singer's teas that I drink that are like, keep everything hydrated when you're gonna sing for like an hour.
Yeah, slippery elm is really good for that. And I do want to make a distinction. I know that you know this, but for our listeners, that there's tea, which is the name of a plant, and then there's herbal teas, and we use those words interchangeably, and there's nothing wrong with that. But just so that people are aware, something like slippery elm or hibiscus or chamomile or rose hips or peppermint aren't actually teas, they're herbal teas or tisanes. And like saying herbal tea is like saying herbal tobacco, and tobacco is the name of a particular plant. And people will make herbal smoking blends that they might refer to as an herbal cigarette. It doesn't have any tobacco in it. Likewise, there's green tea, red tea, aka black tea, white tea, oolong tea, yellow tea, hei cha. Those are all tea from the same plant. And that there's these herbal teas, which are really just completely unrelated to tea, different plants that we use the way that we use tea.
Yes, good that you said that. My knowledge is definitely much greater in the herbal tea realm. But I mean, I love Chinese tea, but I definitely know a lot more about the properties of herbal teas just because I've worked with them more.
Right. Yeah, I appreciate herbal teas, and it's not my wheelhouse. It's not my specific area of knowledge. And like I said, lots of our team members are herbalists and they are knowledgeable about herbs. And I have a huge amount of respect for the world of herbalism. And I'll say like chamomile tea. I'm not like a stickler for the language. For me, it is important that people understand that tea is the name of a plant. And once that understanding is established, then I don't mind if people use the word tea. So, it might not be accurate, but there's nothing wrong with it. That doesn't bother me or offend me when people say hibiscus tea, for example, and I'll say it too. As long as people know that it's not actually tea, and there is a plant called tea, and that plant has thousands of different forms. And the reason that's important is that until people understand that tea is a single thing with many variations, you can't develop a culture of connoisseurship around it. Because, for example, you can be a chocolate connoisseur, right? But you can't be a candy connoisseur because you can't compare 86% shade-grown Costa Rican cacao with starbursts.
Yeah.
You know, they're completely different things, and there's no basis for comparison. And if there's no basis for comparison, then you can't really develop a culture around it. Same with like, you know, wine. Like you can be a sommelier of wine, but you're not going to be a sommelier of wine and whiskey and bourbon, you know, and vodka and.
Great way to explain this. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and if everyone's like, oh, you know a lot about tea, because people ask me about herbs all the time, and I'm just like, that's not my wheelhouse. There are people who are more qualified than I am. And did you know that tea is one particular plant? Because if tea is just any plant, then it's a infinitely big world. Yeah. And again, you can't compare. You can't say, oh well, my favorite tea is, you know, hibiscus. And well, you can't compare hibiscus to red tea or oolong tea because they're not the same plant. But you can compare red tea to oolong tea because they are the same plant.
Oh, fascinating. That's so cool. Never thought of that before. Now I'm going to analyze my tea cabinet.
I mean, and that's, like I said, herbal teas are great. I drink them. I think they're awesome. And I'm definitely, we're all on the same team, all those plants, you know, team plants. And that's definitely a lot of my job, is helping people develop this understanding because of the linguistic shortcomings in English. Mm-hmm. That tea is the name of the plant, and that we have that connection to it. And, you know, that is this one particular thing.
Before I ask you my closing question, is there anything else that you would love to cover or talk about, and maybe tell everyone where they can find you and where they can order tea from and where they can follow you?
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks so much. So yeah, I mean, if you'd like to learn more about all of this kind of abstract stuff that I'm talking about tea, you can go visit our website, westchinatea.com. West like the direction, China like the country, tea like a drink with jam and bread, all one word. And you can also find us on Instagram. We're very active on Instagram. Again, West China Tea. That's just our username is West China Tea. And you can follow us there. We have a Mighty Networks, which is our bespoke social network. It's like Facebook, but instead of being terrible, it's just about tea. And it's meet.westchinatea.com, meet.westchinatea.com. You can watch our YouTube channel, Tea House Ghost, ghost like boo, and you know, Tea House Ghost. And you can visit us there. We've got two main shows on that channel. One is Gong Fu Tea Cha. If you want to get really nerdy and do a deep dive and hear me talk about tea for like hours at a time, then you can watch that. If you want to just watch some people hang out and drink tea and talk about stuff in 360 degrees, you can watch T60. And yeah, and you can find us in Austin. If you're in Austin or visit Austin, you can find us at West China Tea House. We're at 4706 North I-35, which is just on I-35, just north of the intersection with Airport Boulevard. We're open 6 days a week. The only day we're closed is Monday, and we have lots of events. We also do a lot of outside events and parties, and we're having a big party in May, on May 21st at Native Hostel. And yeah, so it's going to be very busy month for us. And then, yeah, we're going to be doing our Instagram live series with Asian and Pacific Islander creators and influencers all throughout the month of May. So if you want to follow that, go to our Mighty Networks or our Instagram to see the schedule for those. And yeah, there you go.
Lovely.
Oh, and you can subscribe to our Tea of the Month. If you are interested in learning more about this, but you have no idea where to start, then you can subscribe to our Tea of the Month Club. It's $30 a month. We will send you a package of 3 or 4 different teas that we've selected, and then you can meet up with us via Zoom during our monthly Zoom meetup, and we'll drink the teas together, and you can learn more about them.
I'm so excited about this Tea of the Month Club. I know my brother will be into this too. Okay, my closing question that I love to end all the interviews with is, if someone gave you a box of everything that you'd ever lost, what would you look for first?
Ooh, gosh.
And it doesn't have to be something tangible. That tricks people up sometimes, but it can be anything.
Man, that's a good question.
It always makes people think for a second.
Doesn't have to be something tangible.
Not if that's not what pops in your head.
That's a really tough one. I will say, I will pick something tangible, which is that when I was a little kid, my mom, funny thing is like my family's Jewish, but I was raised Christian. So my mom converted before I was born. And I'm not Christian, but my mom got me a little gold cross when I was a little kid. And I wore this cross every day of my life from the time she got it for me until one day when I was at camp and I lost it. It broke off my neck and it fell off into the dust, and it was just a little flake, a little thin gold flake of a cross, and it was lost and I never found it. And I'd probably look for that, and not because again, I'm not a Christian and I probably wouldn't wear it again, but it's just something that I remember losing early on. It was a very traumatic loss for me. And I don't know what I even do with it, but it's something that my mom gave me and that I had for a long time. And it's kind of a little piece of my childhood that's gone forever. So probably that.
That's great. I've been loving all of the variety of answers that I've gotten to this question. It's becoming my favorite one to ask people.
If I was to think about it more and think about it broader, I might have a different answer, but it might even be so personal that I wouldn't want to share it.
Yeah. Love it. Well, thank you so much for being here with me today. And thank you everybody that made it with us to the end. And definitely check out his tea house. It's phenomenal.
Thanks so much, Anastasia. It was lovely talking to you. Thanks so much for having me on the show.
Thank you so much.
Have a great day.
You too.